I can try and pick like something off the floor, and my arm just like
Oh my
goes.
God,
I'm like, how old am I?
Literally.
Yeah, or like trying to stand up, and my knees just like don't work, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 22. Like I'm not a grandma,
Oh
you
man.
know.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of The Other Box, where I, Lizzy Gür, talk to people who have interesting things to say and I try and understand them a little better. I'm currently recording this in a conservatory, so I apologise for the slightly distracting, albeit serene, outside noises. This episode features Anna Parkinson, who is a 22-year-old student recently diagnosed with Crohn's disease. For those of you who don't know, Crohn's is a form of inflammatory bowel disease, which is an autoimmune disorder in which the immune system attacks the digestive system. The inflamed GI tract can cause anything from mouth ulcers and sore throats to extreme abdominal pain or vomiting and diarrhea. It currently can't be cured, and it usually requires very heavy medication or even surgery to keep it under control. Some of you may know that I also suffer from this disease, so this episode definitely ended up being more of a chat than an interview, as we talk about maybe the lesser known aspects of having an illness like this, and particularly to what extent we consider ourselves disabled by it. I've shared a few links in the description if you would like more info on Crohn's or IBD in general, and I also want people to know that my DMs are open. If you suffer from anything similar and you just want to rant, reach out to me. These autoimmune disorders can be really isolating, and Anna and I both realised that firsthand, so feel free to message me on my Instagram at theotherbox anytime, or alternatively there's an anonymous messaging service on my website too. Thanks so much for listening. It's a bit of a longer one, so make yourself a cup of tea and enjoy the show.
We might end up talking about it anyway, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, cool. Well, first of all, thank you so much for kind of being here and for reaching
That's
out.
Right.
I've wanted to talk about this, obviously, for a long time, but it's not something that's easy to get people to kind of talk about, so...
Definitely not.
Really appreciate you kind of
No, that's
reaching
alright.
out.
It's a pleasure.
I was just wondering whether you could kind of start us off by talking a little bit about your diagnosis and how long you've been dealing with symptoms and just things like that.
Yeah, so I was kind of diagnosed with IBD stuff when I was about 15. Starting on gluten-free diet, that kind of thing, and it worked for me for like years. They kind of diagnosed just proctitis, so that's just inflammation of like the lower end. And then I was fine for a long time, and then the past 2 years I've just not been well. It's just been getting worse. Had checks again, they thought it was just the proctitis, and then had a camera test while in hospital November just gone, and then they said it was Crohn's disease, which didn't surprise me. I think it's been kind of like pumping away for a while. All the inflammation and stuff kind of thing. So yeah, although it's a new diagnosis, the IBD side, irritable bowel disease, for anyone that doesn't know, isn't like a new thing for me really.
So why, if it isn't a new thing for you, why do you think it took so long for you to kind of get diagnosed?
It's so difficult because partly COVID didn't help, as that was kind of around the time. I probably would have been seen in clinic quicker, that kind of thing, in person, but they just, unless all your blood tests show something immediately, they do kind of just go, oh, well, you're fine then. I don't know if you found that.
Yeah. Well, I definitely did. I think because a lot of the symptoms often manifest themselves in things like fatigue and insomnia, and they're all just kind of buzzwords that doctors just go, oh yeah, it's whatever.
Yeah, they just totally invalidate symptoms, and it's just a nightmare. And then they go, oh, well, it's probably anxiety, oh, it's probably IBS, and you're like, no, like, I'm pretty sore, like, and I don't feel well. Your body's kind of fighting against itself. So yeah, it took a while to be quite persistent. I actually admitted myself to A&E like 4 times. over summer and like September, being like, I need help, and obviously because the doctors and nurses that you see in A&E are not specialists, so unless you've got a blockage or unless there's an internal bleed going on, then they just send you home. Which when I needed, like, obviously steroids and stronger medications and stuff, but I finally got in, and I was in for a month, and that was a very difficult month, as you can imagine.
You were in hospital for a month?
I was in hospital for a month. Again, at the beginning it was, shall we do a camera test? Shall we not? Shall we check? Oh, it's probably this, it's probably that. Again, just dancing it around it. And you've got to be pretty persistent and put your foot down. But we got somewhere in the end, and I was very happy to come home.
I can imagine. That actually blows my mind, because I spent a week in hospital around just before Christmas time, so about the 2nd week of December.
Right.
And honestly, it was so hard for me. I don't know how you can do it.
And as well, because obviously our families can't, like, you can't see anyone. So I wasn't strong enough at first to kind of get up out of bed and like go to the main reception, but as the weeks went on, like, I'd go to the reception, just like wave, and it was so sad, it must be so hard for especially like elderly people, and at least, I don't know if you did it, but I used like Zoom and like WhatsApp video call and that kind of thing while I was in there with my family, which obviously helps, but for a lot of people they don't have that, obviously.
Yeah, no, definitely. It definitely kind of open my eyes to that, how difficult it must be for people who don't have people visiting them or kind of keeping in touch with them, because if I didn't have my family members calling up on me and checking up on me, I don't know how I would have made it through that week. So
were you in hospital with because of your Crohn's and
I was. So it was, like I said, it was the 2nd week of December, and it was the week that my boyfriend was supposed to be visiting from Dorset, so he lives a really, really long way away, and we rarely see each other.
Oh my gosh.
And he'd already come up, but then like I was kind of feeling really ill, but I was putting it off because I wanted him to come see me and stuff. But it got to the point where I was in such bad pain I could honestly not stand up. I couldn't eat. I was vomiting. And I just eventually my family and my partner were just like, you need to go to the hospital. But it's not an easy thing, as you say, with COVID and everything as well. It's so hard to get people to kind of take you seriously.
It is, it really is.
I think a big part of it is the fact that it's a very invisible illness.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it's kind of, it's labelled that a lot as one of those invisible conditions that people don't see, and they wouldn't know that you have that condition unless you told them. What part about that kind of, how does that affect you, the fact that it's not visible?
It's difficult because as well, with the weight thing, people see you and think you're skinny, so you're healthy, as well, which sometimes obviously that's kind of also, you might have found like a side effect is not being able to put weight on and losing weight because you're vomiting and because you struggle to eat, appetite goes down, etc. It's so hard because I don't tend to, obviously my close friends and family know, but I don't tend to share it around like so much because people look at you and think you look healthy, so you're fine, kind of thing. But it is hard to deal with, but it is becoming more recognised, and chronic illnesses and that kind of thing, people are advocating for, to recognise these invisible illnesses. So it is difficult.
I don't know how I feel about it being invisible, because on the one hand, like you, I'm quite private about it, and it's one of those illnesses that's not easy to talk about. It's got a lot of uncomfortable symptoms that you don't want to go like showing around to everybody. But on the other hand, I kind of do find myself wishing that there was something about me that kind
just
of people
a scratch,
knew.
Just a cut, something, just to say, definitely.
So that people could see what's going on, like inside of our bodies, because it affects you so profoundly on a daily basis.
A lot of the time you might mention and people are like, oh yeah, it's IBS, I get that. A lot of the time it's like, no, it's more than just like, obviously IBS is awful when you have it, badly, like having diarrhea and stuff all the time. Yeah, but they are very different. And obviously Crohn's disease and IBD kind of debilitates the whole body,
Yeah. So in what ways has it kind of debilitated you then? How's it affected your kind of daily life?
One of the main things, obviously one of the main things, I went into hospital because I'd stopped eating because I just couldn't. And for months I developed quite a bad relationship with food because I would eat food and get these symptoms. So I then would try to eat, my throat would close up, I would gag, I would, not be able to swallow it, panic attacks, everything. So that manifested itself quite badly, to the point where I dropped to kind of a dangerously low weight. And I was just having water literally, and it became obviously quite psychological by that time, and I was struggling to get out of that cycle. Aside from that, obviously the weight loss, I mean, I don't know, listeners might find this not very nice, but I suppose we've got to share the reality
please.
of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously passing like a lot of blood, mucus, urgency, so you can go in like, at my worst it could be like 30 times a day. And feeling like you need to go all the time and nothing be there, just blood. And then I'd feel sick on the toilet, you'd be sick on the toilet, and it's just like the worst, the pain. I'd luckily, until 6 months ago, I'd never really struggled with pain with it, until my Crohn's kind of got worse, and my goodness, I thought I could deal with pain, but that it's absolutely excruciating. Like,
it's
in
so
hospital,
horrible.
it's the worst ever. You just can't stand up, you can't move from the pain. It's awful. So yeah, those are the main things. Obviously fatigue is a massive one, but obviously that comes with not eating and weight loss and malnutrition and stuff. So yeah, they were the main ones for me. Luckily I don't vomit too much. I know, as you mentioned that obviously you struggle with that. I'm quite lucky that I don't tend to get that. It tends to come out the back end instead.
Well, I do sometimes wonder whether the vomiting is more of a response to the pain, to be honest, because it does get to the point where it makes you so nauseous.
Yeah, for me it is. If I do vomit, it's the pain. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You mentioned about it being kind of a psychological thing as well at a certain point. And obviously conditions like IBD can affect your mental health so badly. Especially, so I learned this pretty recently, but especially because a lot of our happy hormones are kind of processed and produced in our gut, in our digestive system. And so if we don't have a functional gut, then a lot of our things like serotonin, they're just not actually being produced. And it's so much more difficult to kind of
function normally.
Exactly. How have you struggled with that as well? I mean, I'm sure you have, but...
Yeah, I mean, I've struggled with mental health for quite a while. I've got quite bad anxiety and OCD in general. I've been on antidepressants for quite a few years that do help a little bit. But with my IBD worse, everything's aggravated. And I've been reading quite a lot up on, the microbiome, gut flora, and that connection with, your kind of mental health and that kind of thing. And it's really interesting how much it's connected. Being a low weight as well, that affects your cognitive ability, for sure, struggling to cope with stuff as well. But definitely Crohn's flare, I've noticed that I'm so much worse. Yeah.
It's also, like you said, cognitive things, just not really being able to, I find that I really enjoy reading, but I find that when I'm flaring badly, I can't focus on anything.
I can't concentrate on anything, no. It's horrible. And you're feeling anxious, or however you're struggling with mental health, so you want to focus on other things, but just TV, reading, nothing. It's really strange.
You just want to kind of cripple up under your covers and not do anything.
Yeah.
It's very validating to speak to somebody who kind of experiences these things, because it's obviously I'm very lucky to have a lot of supportive people around me and things, but it's very difficult to express how it affects you every single day unless you
to be honest, definitely. Until now I've never really spoken to anybody about it this openly or this much. Obviously doctors and nurses in hospital, but obviously that's different. Again, they perhaps don't have the same experience or the same condition, so it's really nice.
I think it's obviously, as we've both kind of established, it is definitely one of those things that people don't often talk about very much, and it makes it very difficult to kind of cope with, but there's definitely kind of a growing awareness and a growing kind of positivity around things like this, which is really nice.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of linked with that, I've been thinking a lot recently, especially with applying to unis and you know, turning 18 and just having to fill out forms all the time. There's always this kind of debate about whether...
I know what you're going to say.
Okay. Whether it's a disability or not. Yeah, I was just... How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's so difficult because I almost don't want that label, but then at the same time, you can get support if you have that label. So it's really difficult. I want to be a fully functioning, now 22-year-old. You know, I don't want to have that. But then at the same time, it can really help and you can get support. So since I had to drop out of work, I dropped out of work, so October 2019. So that's like quite a long time that I've been getting quite a lot worse. So I've been getting disability allowance for a while, and starting that off was difficult. Once I got it, I was like, why have I not done this before? Like, this is super helpful. I can buy all my gluten-free foods with it, all the extra stuff, you know. It pays for the car insurance, so I can go out. It's good for my mental health, you know. So yeah, I'm feeling better about it now, but I still feel embarrassed to say I've got a disability, because I think, well, that person can't walk and I can. So I'm not entitled to it. And everyone's like, yes you are, you know. And also for university, you know, I'm planning for September to get a studio, because it's got its own bathroom, it's got its own kitchen. So, you know, with my OCD and cooking different things, and if I have a flare, you don't want to be, you know, sharing a bathroom.
Shared bathrooms. Oh my god, that's my worst nightmare, honestly.
Literally. So I'm down to earth. I'll share with anyone. I don't mind sharing kitchen, bathroom, but because of my conditions, it's not going to be feasible. So I'm going to apply for, you know, this like extra disability allowance for university, and again, that same issue of like, do I deserve it, kind of thing. And kind of labelling yourself with a chronic illness is like a difficult thing so young. I don't know if you find as well. Obviously it's quite like a bit more new for you. But some people find the label really helps, you know. I think
for me it's like very similarly to you. I definitely rejected that label for a long time, especially kind of when I was first diagnosed, which was not actually that long ago, but I do feel like I've kind of changed my attitude to all of this in the past year and a half or so. It's hard, as you say, looking at people who are visibly disabled, and you know, it is an embarrassing kind of thing to have to say, well, yeah, I'm disabled too, you know. It's like but the reality is that it disables you. It stops you from living your life the way that other people do.
Yeah, totally, definitely. I don't know, I still have the issue with saying I'm disabled. I don't think I would, but that's my issue with it, I think. I think probably I would come to terms with that. I would use the term probably like chronic illness, perhaps, because it comes and goes. Like, I have periods where I'm like fully functioning until obviously more recently, and I have periods where I'm not. So I imagine kind of disability to be kind of like a continuous thing, but maybe that's, you know, that could be wrong, because, you know, some people experience things in different ways and that kind of things. But that's my personal view on it in my head at the moment, but I'm still working my way around that, you know.
I do think it has a lot to do with kind of our ideas about disability in general, you know, like what do we see disabled as being, when you think about you know, mental health issues and things like that. A lot of those illnesses can be extremely debilitating, to the point where obviously, you know, you can't function as normally as somebody else would, and does that mean that you're able-bodied or able-minded? Maybe
it's so difficult, isn't it? I think also it's more, sometimes we don't want to label ourselves because of what other people will think, or how they will view it. It's not actually, wait, I would be comfortable with that myself, but what about other people, when we shouldn't be worrying about that, you know?
I do think that it has such a profound kind of effect on how we live our day-to-day lives, that in some ways it definitely warrants that label.
I'm quite lucky. I've I've kind of improved a little bit over the past few months. You know, before I couldn't literally leave the house because I needed the toilet all the time or because of these pains, and you kind of forget how much it does debilitate you. Yeah.
I think that is one of the biggest things, because it affects your social life so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not knowing whether you're going to be able to make those plans, having to cancel plans last minute, and not really wanting to talk about why. And you know, so that is another aspect of it that people don't really know about unless it's pointed out to them.
I've found I've kept my close friends, and I've perhaps lost the friends that are kind of, you know, weren't as close. Definitely through this flare, and I don't mind that at all. Like, it's not an issue, but you know, it is hard because you can't, you know, make those plans, and you have to cancel, and there'll be people that you aren't close with that won't be able to, you know, understand that, or don't feel able to, and that's absolutely fine. You know, you keep the friends that, you know, that will kind of stay by your side, kind of thing. But yeah, it's so hard as a young person. You know, I can't drink alcohol, just would put me in a flare straight away, and it's such an, you know, it's getting better now, but it is like, you're not having a drink, you're having, and then I can't have like orange juice because that affects me as well. So I'm like, you know, it's like,
are you quite aware of like what foods are your triggers and things like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty aware. I'm trying to like define it down. It's kind of hard. I've got the main ones, but now I'm like, well, I can be bloated on a day or feeling ill, and I'm like, well, was it lunch yesterday or breakfast the day before, or and it's kind of like, what? But the main ones I'll notice immediately, like citrusy, like fruit juices. I can't. So when you go in a pub, I'm like, well, I'll just have water, and it's just such like, it's so boring, obviously, and unless people really understand. And even for me, I'm like, well, I don't want to go out because that's embarrassing, you know, as a young person, and yeah, it makes it difficult.
Have you kept like a diary, like a food diary or something, in order to kind of figure that out?
Yeah, so I'm kind of doing that a little bit at the moment. I went gluten-free like 5 years ago, and that helped me massively, so I've just stayed gluten-free for a long time. In terms of other stuff I know to avoid, spicy things like carbonated fizzy drinks. I know like garlic and onion set me off. Obviously, like fatty fried foods, takeaways, a complete no-go. And I didn't find that out by keeping a diary. I would eat it and I'd just know, kind of thing. But at the moment I'm trying like lactose dairy free to see if that helps, which is difficult because my dietitian gives me supplement milkshakes that are like full of milk and lactose. So this is a difficult thing I'm dealing with at the moment. So I'm trying to make my own with like avocado and banana and almond milk and peanut butter, that kind of thing. But then you're like, wait, I don't know if people will know this, but when you're in a flare, don't have fibre. So it's like, okay, I can't have peanut butter, I can't have whole grain bread, I can't have brown rice, I can't have all these things that are high calorie. So it just makes it so difficult because you're restricting and you're trying to control your flare at the same time. The
thing is, there's so many foods that will cause a flare-up that are so nutritious, and not only are you trying to control your flare-up, but you're also trying to be as, you know, you're trying to feed your body with as many nutrients as you can, even though your body's kind of rejecting all of it. And the fatigue just compounds and compounds.
Oh, I know. And then you've got to just eat white food, and that doesn't help with fatigue or anything like that. I know with the stuff I've been reading about the gut flora and everything, you know, after your flare, you have to rebuild this microbiome because you want a range of microbiome in your gut. And I know for people with Crohn's, a lot of the time we don't have a very good range of this in our gut, and that's why we probably struggle. So, you know, a lot of probiotic, prebiotic foods, reintroducing the fibres later on, but that's kind of after you've got the inflammation down and you're starting to rebuild, kind of thing. So I found that out recently, which was super interesting.
That does sound really interesting. Yeah, I wish I knew more about this stuff, because I think for me it's so overwhelming, all of it, and there's so much information about what you shouldn't eat, what you should eat, what's best for you, what isn't.
Everyone contradicts each other because one thing works for someone and one thing works for someone else. Somebody can eat nightshade vegetables, which is like, you know, tomatoes, peppers, that kind of thing, and somebody makes them vomit for 3 days. You know, it's just like real trial and error, and nothing work. You know, they're like, try this recipe book, and you're just like, whoa. It's so yes, it's so hard. So you just need to take it try one thing at a time yourself, and it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I don't know whether maybe you'll know a bit more about this as well, but Crohn's disease at the moment doesn't have any known cause. We don't really know what causes a disease like Crohn's, but there are things that are thought to kind of set it off in somebody. So if you're born with just a weak kind of microbiome, or you know what you said, or sometimes it can be kind of an overreaction to some kind of infection or something like that just never goes away. And other times it can even be psychological things like trauma, you know, and your body's kind of response to stress.
Yeah, definitely.
I just wondered kind of, you know, do you have any idea, do you connect it with anything else in your life, or how do you feel about why you kind of ended up with this horrible disease?
I kind of wonder, because sometimes you often see it running in families, especially with ulcerative colitis. You know, it can be genetic. I know people that have got the mum, the grandma, the brother who all have it. But for me, there's no one. So I put it down to anxiety and stress, I think. Because I'm pretty bad since I was young, so I think that's probably why it developed. But at times I've been the most anxious I've ever been, and it's been fine, so it's quite difficult.
It's unpredictable, isn't it? It's hard to kind of line it up with anything else. I find that as well.
I did read that it's more like common in urban areas than rural areas, but obviously that's the same with cancer, any medical, you know, condition, because obviously it's going to be better where there's fresh air and you're eating probably better food and that kind of thing. So I think
it's as you say, you know, there's things that we can do to help it: eating well, avoiding processed foods, avoiding kind of an artificial diet, getting fresh air, getting exercise. But the thing about this kind of illness is obviously that it makes it really hard to do any of those things.
Oh yeah, definitely. And as well, sometimes those things don't work. Like, you can be on the best diet ever, you can be living in the countryside, the most stress-free life, and you can still have a flare-up. And this is the thing, you know, a lot of the time everyone's like, do some yoga, stop eating cheese and eat more fruit. And it's just like, I'm really sorry, but I actually have no control over this whatsoever. I'm trying, you know, and it gets so frustrating. I imagine you find that as well.
I think it is difficult, because obviously I know a lot of my family are you know, trying to be supportive and trying to help as much as they can, and I'm very, very lucky to kind of have a lot of people.
It comes from a good place.
Yeah, definitely. But at the same time, it's always like, you know, oh, try this tea. This person like cured the gut problems with like no medication, just a diet, and it kind of it does make you feel like almost there's this stigma about being on like you know, medication to cure you, as if you're supposed to do all of this work alongside dealing with your illness to kind of cure it yourself.
Yeah, I definitely deal with that. I think, oh well, that diet worked for that person, so why isn't it working for me, and why am I having to be on all this really strong medication?
Do you mind me asking what medication you're actually on?
Yeah, so I'm on prednisolone at the moment, steroids. Yeah. You probably know that one quite well.
Yeah. I've just finished my third round of it, actually, just a couple of days ago.
Have you? So have you come off it?
Yeah, so I'm completely off it now.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay, that's really good. So I tried coming off it, didn't work well. Tried coming off it again, didn't work well. So I've been on it since November now, which is quite a long time to have like a continuous one. Like that's the longest I've ever had. And obviously, for people listening, like, so you can get like steroid-induced diabetes, you can get like arthritis, joint problems, like there's a ton of stuff. So they want you to come off it as fast as possible. But obviously, if all the stuff isn't working, then it's difficult. So I've started on, when I was in hospital, something called infliximab, also known as Remicade, which is a biologic. So that basically stops your body attacking the area of inflammation. So kind of similar to like chemotherapy, but not as strong, obviously. Obviously stops you producing as many white blood cells, that kind of thing. So it's meant to stop your body attacking itself, which is what what our kind of intestines and colon are doing. But it's not really been working for me.
Oh, really?
So from leaving hospital, in hospital I was on IV steroids. So upon leaving hospital, going on to the oral prednisolone and the infliximab, my symptoms have been returning. So I've been like, oh gosh, am I going to end up back where I was? But I'm still kind of slowly kind of carrying on. I had my camera test only on Wednesday, and inflammation was only mild, whereas in November it was like the worst ever. So something's worked along the way, but we're not really sure what it was. It could have been the stuff in hospital. So it's difficult. So they're thinking of starting me. I've got an appointment with my GI doctor on Monday, so they might start me on a different biologic. There's loads of medications that they can put you on, but obviously it's like side effects, and then your immune system's suppressed, so you're like, I've got to stay in longer and shield.
There's definitely an added element of all of this happening in the middle of COVID, where the very little exposure you might have to the real world, even if that's going shopping or just things that people do nowadays to kind of stay sane, we can't do because we're extremely immunocompromised.
Yeah, definitely. My thing was I would drive to the shop and get ingredients and cook. Like, I love doing that kind of thing, and that was my little get out for even when I wasn't well, I'd try and do that. And obviously now I just can't. Like, I'll get in the car and my parents will drive to the shop and I sit in the car park and wait, and then they ring me like, is this what you want? Literally. And it's just so sad. And it's so, but I've kind of got used to it a little bit, and I'll still go on walks and stuff. Obviously walks are fine. But especially as a young person, because my friends are like, can't we just go on a distance walk? Or can't we just like go around to your house? And I'm like, maybe if it wasn't for COVID, like, I wouldn't be as careful, but I know that, and you probably know that if we got it right now, we could get pretty sick. Absolutely. And we don't want to risk that.
I just wanted to talk a little bit actually about prednisolone, because obviously I actually didn't know that you were on that as well. But for me, that has actually been one of the hardest things, is being on that steroid. It's not the first steroid I've been on. I was on budesonide maybe a year ago when I kind of first had my flare up. But this one is just so nasty. What side effects did you experience with it?
Yeah, so, I mean, when I first start taking it, I always get an upset stomach. Obviously, I have an upset stomach anyway, but it's like on top because it's such a strong drug. So it's like a different type of upset stomach on top of what we already have. And then I get quite a lot of joint pain, like, I feel like muscle weakness. I can try and pick like something off the floor and my arm just like goes. I'm like, how old am I? Literally. Yeah, or I like try and stand up and my knees just like don't work, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 22, like, I'm not a grandma.
Oh man. I was a waitress. It was kind of like my first job, and I did that job for like maybe 4 months before being diagnosed. And then I was kind of okay on my medication and everything, but then obviously I had another flare up and was put on these steroids, and trying to do waitressing, like carrying trays and stuff like that. I honestly couldn't do it. Like, the amount of times I would drop things and get to the table, and not just that, but all of the brain fog that comes with it as well. So like, I'd go to a table and then they'd ask me for ketchup, and like 30 minutes later I've still not got the ketchup, and I'm just like, wait, what am I doing? Like, where am I? Like,
oh, nightmare. I got like, it seemed to improve a bit, but I got like major like hair thinning at first. And I'd like never had that before, and I was so self-conscious of it.
I got the opposite. I got like really, like, I got loads of like facial hair and like hair on my shoulders.
Now I do.
Really?
Like, now I do. So I got hair thinning, and now I'm like a monkey.
I felt like that.
And I literally, like, the other day, I think I had some shorts on downstairs, and my dad was like, Your legs are like hairier and darker than mine. I'm like, yeah, I've got like fluff on the stomach. I'm like got a little tash going.
Same.
Like,
obviously I'm like quite dark haired anyway, so like I've already got a lot of dark hair to deal with, and this on top of it, I was like...
But these days it's like everyone's pretty liberal with like hair and stuff and that kind of thing.
It's kind of trendy.
So that can kind of help being young. Yeah.
I got the moon face as well. That was pretty awful.
Yeah, see, I don't think I've got that.
You don't look like
I've heard a lot of people have that. Yeah, so I'm quite lucky in that sense, but I know a lot of people can come off the steroids and still have that for like ages after. have been, my appetite also, especially on the higher doses, I would just like feel like eating all the time, which is obviously great at that moment. For trying to put weight on and stuff. But as I came down, it went away quite quickly.
That was actually one of the things I really enjoyed about it as well. It was around Christmas time that I was on 35 milligrams of it. And so I was like just non-stop eating. Again, I remember being at my boyfriend's house and just like raiding his fridge. And like just like I had no shame about asking for snacks straight after dinner. And like, but it did feel good in a way, because as you say, it makes you kind of feel like a normal person, like
a normal person. Like I can eat and I feel hungry, like this is good. I know for a lot of people it can be quite debilitating, because some people put weight on, you know, and if they've never struggled with the weight, that can be quite hard for them. But for us that want to put weight on and you know, don't usually feel like eating, it's definitely a nice thing to have.
And that's a very difficult thing for people to relate to. It's difficult to talk about. I mean, I know you reached out because of the piece that I wrote recently, which kind of touched on this, which, you know, without sounding like people should, you know, kind of feel sorry for us for being skinny or whatever. But it is, it comes with a lot of insecurities, and it, more importantly, makes you feel very ill. Like, it just, you know, you don't feel healthy. And so people don't really understand why you would want to feel like that, why you would want to put more weight on, and why you'd want to feel more kind of, you know, fuller and whatever. But so it's that aspect as well of it, like not really being relatable to other people, that's very isolating, I found.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I look at my sister, I look at my friends, and I'm like, what I would give to have that, but it's hard because then they're insecure about the body for the opposite reason. So it's really difficult, and they're like, oh, you can have some of mine, and you just don't know what to say, and it's really difficult. Honestly, being a low weight I think that was what made me feel even worse. That was the most ill I've ever felt. You know, like I said, your cognitive function, I was not thinking straight. I was like a crazy person in hospital. I was, you know, my brain just wasn't functioning properly because you're malnourished. You're not giving your body what it needs to function. And I couldn't, like, I literally, one of the main things, like, my muscles kind of like wasted away, so I like couldn't walk properly. So I would try and do stairs, and I had to pull my legs, and that was one of the biggest things to me. Like, I got so upset about it, and I didn't shower for a really long time in hospital. One, because I couldn't get up because of the pain. I have to say one of the downfalls this time is because they're so busy with COVID, they didn't come round with like washballs or anything. I avoided it because I didn't want to see myself in the mirror, because it scared me of how skinny I looked. It was pretty scary. It's a really difficult topic to talk about. You know, you don't want to trigger anyone or offend anyone or that kind of thing. And a lot of the time people would put me down as having an eating disorder. But, you know, I was then sent away because I didn't have issues with my weight, because I wanted to be bigger. But again, I don't know if you've heard of ARFID.
No, I don't think I have.
So that's avoidant restrictive food intake disorder.
Okay.
So it can be developed, so you can have problems with swallowing. If you've had like a trauma like choking, for example, then you might struggle eating. And it can be around if you've got a health condition that's made you feel so ill that you don't eat, or things like, you know, phobia of vomiting, that kind of thing. So that's what they kind of labelled it as. Luckily, I've kind of got a bit better, so I find eating like way easier now. So yeah, that's definitely not recognised, kind of the other side and the different types of eating disorders that are out there that might not be related to weight. So that's definitely more like research going into that at the moment. I went off a bit on a tangent there.
No, that's
but, you
okay.
know.
No, that's interesting. Like, I love learning about this stuff, because again, that's just something I didn't know. So I'm guessing you identify with that label then? You kind of see yourself as having an eating disorder?
I wouldn't say now.
Okay.
I've got a lot better. Even like a month ago, I would have said yes, but definitely in the past month, it's improved a lot. I don't have panic attacks when I have to swallow food. I can sit at the table with my family and eat a meal. I still get the sensations in my throat and panic, and sometimes I get up and kind of breathe and have some water. But I kind of learnt from hospital that food is fuel. and I need it. So I'm kind of said to myself that I'll never kind of go back there again. I did get to the point where they were trying to put feeding tubes in me and stuff.
Wow.
So that was kind of like a moment where I was like, okay. But the thing is, I was so sick. The reason I managed to start eating again is because they started me on strong medication, and my stomach got better. So a lot of people say, "Oh no, it's the psychological side. You got over it." I was like, "No, it was my Crohn's."
Yeah.
As soon as that started to get a bit better, I felt more able to eat. So it's just like a catch-22,
Well, I was going to say the same thing because, I've thought a lot about whether it is, I mean, I think there definitely is a mental side to it in some senses. I associate food with pain, basically, because every time I would try and eat anything, it would just be so painful. The whole process is just not good. So in a sense, it kind of is that, but at the same time, like, I love eating. When I've got an appetite, I love to eat. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I'm exactly the same,
So it's hard to kind of know whether it's an eating disorder or whether it's related to your Crohn's and whether that even makes a difference.
I think there definitely are crossed wires and crossover for sure. And in hospital it was very much like they were just saying you need to eat, and I was like, I physically can't. It's not just me being panicky about it. I feel very ill when I put this food in my mouth and try and eat it, and the symptoms that follow. I've kind of found a few people mention it within the IBD community. I was like, oh, there's somebody else, like they get it. So it's nice to talk to you who, you experience kind of similar things as well. But yeah, I definitely think it's quite a grey area that isn't talked about that much.
Why do you think this kind of stuff is so difficult to kind of talk about with people?
Yeah, I think obviously people don't like being vulnerable and showing that side. Obviously because of the not nice symptoms, because there's things like blood, there's things like vomit and mucus, and people are like, oh, bodily fluids. And like, people don't like talking about going to the toilet but it's so like revolved around our everyday lives. Like I don't know if you found, but I'm like talk about it so easily and openly now because you talk to so many people and so many doctors. You just literally tell them and you know that they don't care.
I remember I used to be like such a kind of private, embarrassed person, and then you have like, I mean, you go through one flare and you're talking to so many people about your like bowel habits that bowel you just have like no dignity, shame left whatsoever.
I've had so many times where like my IBD nurses have ran me back, obviously before COVID, like on the train, or on the bus, or in a taxi, and I'm like, they always managed to ring them. But I've kind of got used to it. I'm just like, I don't care,
I think it gets to the point where you're just like, this is my body. It's a lot harder for me to deal with than it is for you to hear about it.
Totally, exactly.
Well, we've actually talked for way longer than I had planned.
I thought that was
but no, thank you so much for that. It's like I said already, it's just so validating to kind of speak to somebody definitely. Kind of my age who goes through the same thing. I think for me, I definitely feel like if I can see the end of something, I can kind of push through it and I can deal with it very easily. Not very easily, but it's definitely a lot easier to deal with, whereas not knowing whether it's ever going to get better is a very difficult thing to come to terms with, and just knowing that you might be dealing with this for the rest of your life.
That was one of the main things for me, and I would get upset about it a lot. Thinking, okay, well, I could be fine for a bit, but like in 2 years it could all come back. But especially being in hospital for so long and then coming out and having kind of like a couple of months where like I went sledging and like I went for walks and I ate kind of normally, I was like, oh, this is amazing, like life is amazing, oh my god. And even just having that for like a little amount of time made me so grateful. So I was kind of like, even if I had that for a few months at a time, like I'm okay with that. In a way, maybe I would say differently because of the middle of the flare, but I was so grateful for that after being so ill. So I'm like, okay, it's fine. I can have a flare, I'll get through it, and then I'll hopefully get a bit better again, and I can live life normally. So that's kind of like, my outlook's changed quite a lot on life, I think, a little bit because of that.